Great. Well, hi everyone. I'm Lavina Gully with the Canadian Food Innovation Network, and today I'm joined by one of our members, Jeff Epstein. How are you doing today, Jeff?
Hi, Lavina. I'm doing great. Thank you very much.
Great. We're going to dive into a very interesting topic of product management, what it is, kind of how we can apply it in the food industry, maybe get into a little day in the life of a product manager, and also talk about career options. So, yeah, before we begin, perhaps you can just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, you bet. So my name is Jeff Epstein, and my company, 16 Volts, offers fractional product marketing services for business-to-business companies, primarily in technology, also in manufacturing. And I'm also president of a company called Grants for Growth, which offers grant and non-dilutive funding guidance for BC-based small businesses. I'm super excited to be joining you today.
Wow, a grant writer as well. That's great. That's definitely a topic of interest to our members, but maybe we'll save that for a separate video.
Sounds good.
We're both in the Vancouver area, and I know there are a lot of tech companies here. And as such, I've seen a lot of job postings. I've met a few people at networking events who are in this position or role called a product manager. I've seen it like in biotech and even like the apparel industry, for example, but I don't see it as often in the food industry. I don't think it's as common. Um, so through this conversation, I wonder if we can just shed some light on that for our members. But maybe to kick things off, why don't we start with defining, what is product management?
Yes, let's do that. So I'm going to quote an organization called the Pragmatic Institute, and they are one of the leading organizations that offer professional development for product managers, product marketers, and other technology professionals. According to Pragmatic Institute, product management oversees a product's life cycle from development all the way through to commercialization. Now, the difference is a product manager has an eye on delivering a product that not only meets customers' needs, but also generates revenue for the company. So they're not just purely about developing a great product that's technically sound, they're also about developing a product that's going to make the company money. So we have a person that's always thinking about who the product is for, what it's supposed to do, and how to do that profitably. And practically speaking, that means that the product manager is part engineer, part designer, part marketer, and they exist in the intersection of all those company functions. So you mentioned that you've seen product management roles in biotech and technology and in apparel. The ironic thing is the product manager role really has its roots in the consumer packaged goods space, going back to the 1930s with Procter and Gamble. So back then they rolled out this role called brand manager, and they still have that role. And that person was responsible for the profit and loss of a given product or product segment. Let's fast forward a bunch of years to the 1960s, and more CPG companies had put this role in their organizational chart as well. By the 1980s, product managers had earned a seat at the strategic table thanks to their clever blend of both technical skills and marketing and business skills. And it's around this time that product design and innovation really started to explode as a business focus. And by the 90s, the rapid growth of the tech sector really entrenched product management as a critical role in the org chart of any company operating in the technology vertical.
Interesting. I like how you describe that. It's kind of that intersection between kind of the technical side and maybe kind of that pure marketing side. Yeah, so it sounds like it's a role that's been around for a little while. Some sectors, have adopted it more than others. What are some of the key responsibilities of a product manager?
Sure. So to keep it simple, the key responsibilities really revolve around ensuring that what the company is building is strong, or producing, if it's food, is strongly aligned with the target audience, and that there's revenue and profit in play. In a tech company, the product manager doesn't do the coding themselves, but they do specific product requirements. What's it supposed to do, but not how to do that job. The product manager doesn't decide what type of campaigns to run or when to run them, and they don't set sales quotas, but they are responsible for helping sales projections and general go-to-market contributions, like the personas of the people you sell to, the personas of the user of the product, and help the company understand those dimensions. They're really also expected to understand the competitive landscape, because that helps determine what to build, when to build it, and how to make it different than what else is out there. Now, today, product managers have the benefit of a lot of sophisticated software and tools and general philosophies that have emerged from other functional areas. For example, design thinking. It's a relatively new process for teams to understand users, the challenges they face, and the innovations that solve them on a very tangible, practical level. I'm also talking about software tools that help with capturing customer feedback, managing the backlog of feature requests, and even tracking a project from start to finish. So a good way to understand what a project manager does maybe is to look at a random day in the life. Should we explore that a little bit?
I think so.
Okay, good. So if I was a product manager, my day would kind of look like this. I'd probably start off with a meeting with the engineers or R&D people. I would look at progress on products under development, what roadblocks are happening. I'd look at the roadmap. We'd be discussing what to prioritize. I'd probably then go to a marketing meeting where I'm going to provide some market research to the marketers. I'll work on messaging and storytelling. We'll talk about a product launch coming up, and I'll help guide that process. Then before lunch, I'll go to a sales meeting and I'll talk with salespeople and find out what they know about users, what they know about buyers of our products. I'll get product feedback from them. I'll hear what they're hearing about the competition in the market, and I'll bring that back to the company. After lunch, it's time to talk financing, right? So I'm going to get into packaging discussions, pricing discussions, profit margins. How can we make this product more efficiently? What kind of price point should it be in? And having those really difficult conversations with the finance and sales teams. At the end of the day, I'm going to wrap up with a meeting with the executives in the company. We're going to talk profit and loss. Here's where we're going. Here's where we're at. Here's the challenges. Here's how we're making money. Here's where we can improve. And here's where we're doing really, really well. So you can see how the product manager really is enmeshed in all these other departments and teams in a company, and how many skills he or she has to have those conversations intelligently and successfully.
Absolutely. Wow. You mentioned before that how some companies have a role called a brand manager. And I know I've worked very closely with some brand managers in the past at food companies. Food industry also very commonly will have, R&D managers. That's a role that I've personally spent a lot of time in my career. And then there's even project managers. I'm wondering how a product manager is different from these three other roles.
Yeah, it's a great question because there is going to be overlap. I think you can start by drawing some similarities between product managers and brand managers, as well as R&D managers, because all these roles tend to look beyond just the product from a technical perspective, and they start to get into market adoption and even financial performance. Certainly brand managers have a big emphasis on sales and marketing. R&D managers probably less so. R&D managers really are a different breed, at least in the tech space, because they're really just focused on the technical side of the business. It's their job to figure out how to deliver the product requirements, right? So the product manager says, we need a product that does this, go away, and the R&D manager has to figure out how to make that product, but not how to take it to market, right? Not how to sell it, not how to package it, not how to brand it. That's not what the R&D managers typically do. They don't get involved in product launches. They don't get involved in marketing, at least not at technology companies. And they have very little to do with the sales team. And while they may do some customer research, they really don't spend a lot of time in customer-facing situations. So if R&D managers are asked to stretch out of the lab, or out of the factory floor into these functions and not just focus on the science, then it would change how you recruit for that role, right? Because you'd be changing the kind of person you're looking for. Now, if you engineer these jobs into tighter lanes, like a product manager and a brand manager and R&D manager, you can recruit more effectively because it's very clear the skill sets you need, as compared to generalists who are better at some parts than at others. So project managers, really, they're another breed entirely. I call them cat herders. Their expertise really is in efficient and methodical execution of a project, regardless of its focus. They come to the table with a methodology of getting projects done and running them efficiently. They're great at running meetings. They're great at mapping deliverables, keeping people on track, and communicating with stakeholders, but they typically don't own the underlying product in any company. For example, a project manager might manage the cycle from idea to build and test to launch, but they're just there to make sure the boxes get checked and the deadlines are met. They don't actually own any of the deliverables underlying. Now, it's important to know that a good product manager has to be good at project management as well, but not the other way around, right? That's why you see a lot of product managers getting their PMP certification in project management.
Interesting. Yeah, there are definitely some similarities around all of those roles you mentioned. Thanks for explaining that. You touched on, product life cycle. I wonder if that's also kind of a good way to kind of get inside the head of a product manager, is to think about, what are some of the perspectives that they bring and responsibilities when they look at things from a product life cycle perspective.
Yeah, good idea. So why don't we start with kind of level setting on what product lifecycle means. Now, I'm sure everybody listening to this or watching this video has a similar mental image of a life cycle, right? Running from birth to growth to death. The same arc applies to products, right? Traditionally, there are 4, maybe 5 life cycle phases. You have ideation, introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. So it kind of looks like, you're going up and then it flattens out, then it starts to taper off like a curve. Now, some experts in different industries have expanded those to include other sub-steps, like validation and prototyping. But let's just keep it simple and go with the 5 stages: ideation, introduction, growth, maturity, and then decline. So the product manager is the person tasked with keeping her eye on that entire cycle and understanding where her products are, so the company can optimize resources around production and distribution and marketing and sales. Now, it's important to note that the product manager doesn't operate in a vacuum, right? They don't have all the answers all the time, but they're the one constantly talking life cycle with sales, with production, marketing, and executive leadership. So let's go step by step. Let's start with ideation. This is where you're conceiving of your idea and then germinating it into test samples to get market feedback and maybe run small localized market tests, right? As a product manager, you'll start with a product brief. This explains what we're trying to make, who it's for, what we want it to do. And that's a very concise document to give structure to your idea that everybody else can see, okay, now I understand who it's for and where it's being positioned. And it's really the true north for the other teams. It's your Bible. If it's not written in the product brief, it doesn't matter and may not even exist. So it's not a locked document. It's not written in stone. It's a living document, but everything about the product needs to be in that brief so other teams can follow along. So let's talk about an example. In the food industry, I'm going to pick a simple one. I'm not a foodie, but let's talk about a butter substitute for home use, okay? So the product manager identifies that the key product characteristics that research has shown that the market wants, and they take that to the food scientists. For example, they want a spreadable product. It should be yellowish in color, salted, refrigerated, and it must include, chia seed extract, because research shows that chia seed is a really high demand and going to be in high demand for health conscious consumers. So the product manager will give these specs to the food scientists, who now have to go away and figure out how to make that work chemically. And they'll also take packaging expectations to the R&D team and the packing suppliers. She'll need to understand what alternates there are in the market. What substitutes are there for butter that they'll be competing against, that they'll be fighting for shelf space, right? She'll also need to work with the finance team now on pricing to ensure that the new product generates the desired revenue and the profit margins the company is after. So that's ideation. Now we get into production, the introduction, or the launch phase. So here we're going to start expanding distribution, going into other markets. We're going to start to do some marketing and public relations to generate some demand and start to make some noise about how awesome this great new product is. You'll engage with an ad agency, a PR agency, maybe you'll find a celebrity spokesperson, and you're really going to ramp up sales now. The product manager, or in often cases the brand manager, will ensure that the marketing team knows who to target and what to say, but they'll let the marketing team choose the channels and the execution of that, right? So imagine it in that product brief, we are targeting households of 3 or more people with a median income of X. And here's what you say to them about this chia-based butter substitute to get their attention. You figure out where to say it and when to say it, but that's where you go.
Okay.
Is that clear so far?
Yeah. So it sounds like they kind of really carry the concept through these kind of initial stages of developing the concept, watching the product get created and made, and then finally, I guess, launch the product. And then is that kind of the end? Like they kind of just move on to the next product, the next launch?
Well, I think a lot of product managers would love it if that were the end at launch, but no, ma'am, definitely not. They're not done yet. Because now the product manager is responsible for staying in contact with sales and distribution partners to keep tabs on how well the product is doing. Because remember, they have P&L responsibilities. So they've got to be hitting revenue numbers and margin numbers. So how well is this being received? They'll probably spend time in retail stores watching what customers are doing. They're picking up the packaging. What are they doing with it? They'll talk to customers about the new product, get some direct primary research feedback because they have to understand the market on behalf of the company. So the launch is really just the beginning. And they're going to monitor product sales, like I said, because they own the business case, they own the profit.
Interesting. So that's kind of like the full life cycle of the product.
Well, we're not done yet because you still have growth, maturity, and decline. So you've launched, and now you're probably going to start expanding into new geographies and markets, right?
Mm.
So maybe you started with independent grocers, and now you're moving into national chains as demand grows and as production scales up. This is where the product manager may build a business case for commercial application of this product to open up new revenue streams. So take it out of home into institutions, for example. Maturity is really when your product seems to have peaked in terms of revenue and distribution. It's a really nice, really stable cash flow, great shelf presence, but it's not really growing anymore. Distributors and retailers still love it because demand is steady and very predictable, but you have to keep investing in advertising to maintain that share of mind, and you have to defend against alternates that are clawing away at your market. At this stage, the product manager is really focused on the competition, on changing consumer tastes, and generally on the lookout for signs of disruption to the business, right? So they're going to be doing that and bringing all that evidence and all that data back to the leadership team and the company at large to make decisions. Finally, we know every product enters a decline stage where sales drop for any number of reasons, and the market seems to be moving on, either to competitors or substitutes. You've squeezed everything you can out of your product, and now you've got to think about end of life and finding a new revenue stream. And end of life isn't simple because you have distribution, you have shelf space, you don't want to lose that shelf space. You can't just stop producing something and send an email to distributors saying, we're done, right? You have to manage that process very proactively.
Right.
It's the product manager and it's the product manager who's tasked with figuring out when a business is no longer viable and also responsible for coming up for ideas to replace it.
Interesting.
All over again.
Interesting. Okay. Now, I think a lot of food companies and a lot of members who might be listening to this, they might think, hey, we're already doing a lot of this work. So maybe it's being done by marketing, or maybe it's being done by R&D, or a combination, of the two. How would a company then decide whether to create a specific product management team or to create this type of kind of specialized role within the organization?
That is a very real and very important question because every company is going to hit that inflection point at different times. Yes, you're probably doing a lot of this work already, but it's happening maybe off the sides of people's desks. Everybody's kind of chipping away at the corners of it. It really comes down to bandwidth. So in small companies, many people are doing bits and pieces of this stuff. Founder, the head of R&D, the marketing manager, but they also have other responsibilities. You'll know it's time to add the product manager role when stuff starts falling off the table, when you maybe lose sight of the competition, or you aren't doing as much consumer research, or you haven't taken a good hard look at pricing in a while. But there's also a cultural angle to follow because smart companies know they have to work hard to retain their top talent. And sometimes that could be as simple as compensation, but other times it's about opportunities to learn and grow for your team, right? So you might have a food scientist who's been with you for a number of years, who seems to have a real natural talent for consumer behavior. They love talking to customers. They love getting out of the lab. Or maybe you have an R&D manager who wants to get into the field more. So these are people that are now showing signs of potential growth into other roles, taking the knowledge they have and expanding on that. There's an opportunity culturally to start introducing the product manager as well. I want to tell you one side story. So back in business school about 1 million years ago, I learned about the concept of job engineering. And it's been around since the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century, when companies started using machines to make goods and began breaking down jobs into discrete tasks and hiring people just to do that task. It could be quality control, picking a bullet off a production line and saying, oh, that's not good. Or maybe it's like cutting a piece of yarn at the end of a roll, that one little job. That's what we're talking about doing here, is job engineering the business function of product management into discrete pieces. When you introduce the product manager into the org chart, you're going to bring a really strong focus on the product, not how it's made, but who it's for and what purpose it's supposed to serve. Other experts can now take care of the science, the marketing, the distribution, and of course, production and manufacturing. But having someone keep their eyes on every element of that life cycle really makes sure your company's paying attention to those milestones. That's a big advantage for your company. Again, it comes down to mindset. a cultural shift towards bringing more discipline or structure into your business, you'll find yourself with better skill development too across your team because everybody's focus kind of narrows. You'll be able to recruit more
Mhm.
clearly and feed people better opportunities.
Interesting. I like how you said that you can kind of approach this kind of role either from like a business side, or maybe you've got a technical person who is, become very interested in the more financial side of things. So thinking about careers and career changes, how would somebody get into a product management role? Is there a traditional track or kind of alternate paths from, if you're either on the technical side or more on, say, of a creative marketing side? Like, how would somebody get into product management?
So it used to be that product managers came primarily from the technical side,
Oh,
and
interesting.
these were people that kind of had. Let's just, for a simple definition, let's call them extroverts versus introverts, right? So an engineer you would consider maybe stereotypically, just to make it simple, more of an introvert. They just want to do their job, and they're super keen on like food science or coding if it's in the tech space, and all they want to do is like figure out how to build a great stable product. But if they start to flirt with marketing and like peek over the cubicle and wonder what's going on in the sales team, and hey, I'd like to talk to customers, kind of get out of their shell a bit, those are the people that are product manager potentials. So chemists, food scientists, and technical people make great product managers if they're starting to look at the business more holistically and the whole chain of activities outside the lab or the kitchen, right? But that said, you don't need to be a chemist or a food scientist to be a product manager. If you have great people in those roles already, the product manager can join the team as an addition, upskilling the whole group by bringing more business acumen, project management, and execution function to the team. So product managers need to be analytical, right? They need to understand the technical side. They need to have a conversation with the food scientist and know exactly what they're talking about. So you're not going to find one hidden in your marketing or sales team. That's pretty unlikely unless they come from that background already. I happen to think it's easier for analytical left brainers to move to the right than for right brains to move to the left, if people understand what I'm talking about there. Right brain is more creative and left brain is more analytical, data driven.
Hmm. Interesting.
So if you're thinking of how do I get trained, or how do I, if I'm interested, I'm a food scientist and this product management idea sounds really interesting for my career. What do you do next? So here in Vancouver, around every year in March, there's a conference called Product Camp, where you're going to meet product managers from all different industries, mostly tech, but all different industries here in Vancouver. It's actually built as an unconference because it's volunteer run and the content is determined by those attending. So they vote democratically on what sessions they want to see during Product Camp. So it's an unconference in that sense.
Mm.
Now, there are some great opportunities for professional training as well. So like I said, my favorite is the Pragmatic Institute. They run sessions in cities across North America. They have an ongoing online presence as well, so you can do it on your own time at your own pace. But there are others. For example, there's the Association of International Product Marketing and Management, AIPMM. Closer to home here in Vancouver, there's BrainStation, and the UBC Sauder School of Business has a product management track, and there are a lot of online options. For example, productschool.com. These are all places you can go to take specific courses or whole diplomas and series of courses to get trained and certified as a product manager.
Interesting. Well, I've actually attended Product Camp a couple years ago, so I can definitely vouch. It's an amazing place and really interesting. Well, I feel like we could talk about this subject for a really long time, but I just want to thank you for sharing your knowledge here and insights with us. I think there's a ton of potential, it sounds like, for the food industry to adopt product management and product management thinking. I should mention we're also going to follow this video up with an article on Yodel, so with some deeper dives into a few other topics. But before we leave, any other kind of final thoughts or messages specific to our CFIN audience or members who are actively innovating in the food industry?
Yeah, so innovating while trying to also run a business is crazy hard. And hats off to the food industry. For those of you, saying, why is Jeff equating food to technology? Food is way more complicated than software. I will never deny that. It's so much harder to test. It's so much harder to bring to market. There's regulations involved. Obviously, there's way less so in software. So the advantage of bringing in product management will really, I think the best way to describe it is the ability to focus, right? It'll get you more disciplined across all your different teams, allowing you to tap into better qualified people for every role. And it's an opportunity to really up your game as a company. So take a look at the model, figure out how it could work for your company and your culture, make it your own. Yeah, that's what I'd recommend.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Very well said. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. Our guest has been Jeff Epstein of 16 Volts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lavina.